Hello everyone, this is Nick Phelps with Forrester Research. Thank you very much for meeting us today for What Email Marketers Need from You in 2014 with Sharvan Boskirk and Kumar Sivaraman. On behalf of Lister and Technologies and Forrester Research, we'd like to thank you for your time and welcome you to our webinar today. Today's presenters are Sharvan Boskirk, who's Vice President and Research Director and lead of Forrester's Email Marketing Research, as well as Kumar Sivaraman, Lister Technologies President. Today's SHAR's discussion around integrated messaging will examine ESP needs that could potentially benefit from offshore services. Given Lister's background in working with ESPs in this model, we wanted to provide a collaborative discussion for you today. So we will also have time for Kumar as well as Q&A at the end. As we go through our presentation, please do feel free to submit questions via the chat function available on this webinar platform. We should have ample time at the end to address those questions and go through them with thoughtful answers. So to begin, I would like to pass things over to Sharvan Boskirk to say hello, introduce herself, and discuss her findings.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for Lister for inviting Forrester to participate in this conference with you all. As Nick mentioned, I'm an analyst here and have spent a number of years studying email marketing. And it just seemed like a good time of year to really think about what you need to care the most about as you make your annual plan for next year. So what we've assembled for you today is a discussion around 3 primary points. Nick, I might need you to help me advance the slide.
Sure.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to run through for you current email marketing trends, a little bit of a snapshot around both marketer and consumer attitudes toward email. Then I'm going to address what marketers need most from vendor partners. So in light of the needs that the market has today, how can vendors who support those marketers help meet their needs? And then I'm going to conclude with a few recommendations that will hopefully inspire some questions for us to discuss together as a group. So if we go ahead and move past the agenda, a few of my snapshots of data here to give you a feel for the current state of marketer and consumer attitudes. We run a study about every year where we're looking at consumer data in terms of how they're responding to and using email as well as other digital promotions. And what I've included here is a little bit of a trend snapshot to just represent the last several years of attitudes toward email marketing. And hopefully what you see from the data here is a general shift toward the positive and away from the negative attitudes. So for example, there are fewer consumers today who indicate that they delete email advertising without reading it than there were 3 years ago. Likewise, fewer are saying that they receive too many email offers and promotions today. And if we go ahead and click onto the next slide, you'll see that these positive attitudes continue, that consumers actually indicate they value promotional messages that are delivered to them through email. So about 35–37% of consumers indicate that they have unsubscribed from promotional emails. That's probably not a surprise just because of the volume of messages and programs that are available to all of us today. But I like the data that we can see coming up underneath that stat, that 20% are printing out emails and bringing it into stores. About 20% are forwarding emails to family and friends. So the takeaway from this bit of consumer data is that here we are about 13 years into the tenure of email marketing, and email attitudes are actually inclining. We also know that response rates are very consistent with what they've been since about 2001. So overall, for a medium that is extremely inexpensive and extremely well penetrated, these are very positive utilization data. What we're looking at here is a medium that hopefully has become more relevant as marketers get better at creating that, but also consumers have understood how to use email to accomplish more of their own tasks. So if we go ahead and click onto the next slide, we'll look at some of the marketer data that we have in response to this. So I mentioned that email has about a 13-year tenure and is one of the most leveraged tools in the digital marketing toolkit. This is actually brand new data just from an enterprise survey that we finished up at the end of Q3. And I've included here just a snapshot of these enterprise firms across the US, UK, and Canada indicating the utilization of different digital tools. And you can see that display ads and email are the most used tools in the mix. So I think email gets a bit of a negative reputation today because marketers are so much more interested in some of the sexier tools, social media, mobile. But when you look at a chart like this, you can see that email is significantly more adopted. So it's much more mature, much more established, and much more widely used across marketers of all types. So if you go ahead and click then onto the next slide, we'll see that part of the reason that email is so well adopted is because marketers are so satisfied with its performance. Now, we're not even looking here at cost, which is another influence over satisfaction, certainly the most cost-effective tool in the mix because it's so inexpensive and works so well. But this is just a satisfaction score on a 5-point scale, where we asked marketers to indicate for us how well satisfied are you with this tactic that you might be employing today. And you can see that ratings and reviews, search, and email top the list in terms of their satisfaction scores. So if we flip on to the next slide, you'll see that the result of this high satisfaction is a continued investment in email. So again, for a very mature medium that's already so well utilized, the notion that marketers would continue to increase investment is a really strong sign. The way to look at this data is to think that in the very left-hand side, the lightest blue that you're looking at actually represents a percent of decrease, percent of folks who say they'll decrease the amount of money that they're spending on this tool. Stay the same as the next blue. Increase then are the darker blues that are to the right. So you can see that we're expecting about 33% of marketers to actually increase investment in email in 2014, and about 43% to maintain their email investments next year. So this is nice, actually, for a particularly mature medium. The other places where you see lots and lots of increase are coming from tools that are very unadopted today. So social media, mobile, actually have a vast percentage of marketers who are not using them at all. And so there's lots of investment that's coming from those. So let's go ahead and click on to the next slide. I think we're ready to transition to a little bit of a story around, so what do marketers need from their vendor partners to take advantage of this opportunity to connect better with their customers? I'll tell you that from Forrester's research, even though email is a more mature medium than it has been, and even though attitudes are on the rise, most email messages today fail. We have an email review methodology that we apply also on about an annual basis to a host of different email programs. The last time we did it, we evaluated 70 different emails across 10 different industry verticals. And we look at them against 15 different criteria that all gauge the usability of the email message, the value that it's contributing to the end user. And we score those 15 criteria on a scale that ranges from a -2 to a +2, where a -2 is a strong fail. Basic functionality to complete a given task is not available. And a +2 is a strong pass, that the functionality is there and it works in a best-in-class way. So what you're looking at here is the distribution of scores across all of the reviews of those 70 email programs that we've conducted. And what I would point you to is sort of the bell curve in the middle, which is that most email programs actually score between a 0 and a +5. So this is interesting because what it says is that they might be scoring extremely well on some criteria, but then very poorly on others. So the positive scores and the negative scores actually cancel each other out, leaving them with an average right around 0. So if we flip on to the next slide, my conclusion in terms of why most email programs fail is because most marketers tend not to balance two fundamentals of what makes an email program work. And those fundamentals are that the email program must balance user need with business goals. Now, I just want to stop for a second and think about that and ask you to all think about that as well. Does your email program balance user needs with business goals? I'll bet for most of you, you have some sort of business goal in mind. That goal might be liquidate distressed inventory. It might be reach a yet untapped audience. But if you've thought of a business goal, I bet you've not thought of the user need. And the user need might be things like save me time, save me money. A few email programs are out of balance the other way. So they are over-focused on meeting user needs, but don't have a clear understanding of what the business value is if those user needs are met. So let me give you an example. On my next slide, I have a few illustrations of the types of user needs that you might uncover, the types of business goals that can be related to those user needs, and then some example programs that tend to demonstrate well against both. So I've just come up with a handful here of possible user needs. Save me time, help me make plans, keep me informed, entertain me. Business goals might be things like engender loyalty, create product preferences. I mentioned liquidating distressed inventory, increase repeat purchases. So some great examples of email content that can meet certain business goals while also meeting user needs are things like recipes, a great way to help a user save time while also engendering product preference. Kraft does this very well. Hershey's Kitchens does this very well to help you think about a particular brand in context of a recipe that might be great around the holiday time or for a particular family occasion. Let's skip actually to be informed. This is a good user need where I think about myself. I have so many different content topics that I'm trying to stay on top of. I love email programs that save me time in terms of pushing me content that otherwise I'd have to go searching through the web for myself. Newsletters are good, how-tos are good. I call these sorts of emails utilities, email newsletters that are aggregating content that I could find on my own, but it's much easier if you collate it for me. So the National Geographic Environment Monthly is a great example here, or the Wells Fargo HomeWire that does things like help somebody who's done their financing through Wells Fargo learn about home ownership. This is an expiring newsletter that works for the first 2 years of home ownership to sort of keep you on top of all of the things that you might not expect as a first-time home buyer. So if we go ahead and flip on to the next slide, I want to introduce another challenge that I think marketers are facing today. So I mentioned that most email programs are already failing because they're not balancing user need with business goals. And the challenge as we move into 2014 is that that's not going to get easier. So the notion of how to meet your user needs and how still to accomplish your business goals actually becomes more challenging when we think about how multi-channel customers are today and will become tomorrow. So Forrester has a concept we call the always addressable customer. And this is a customer who goes online multiple times a day via multiple devices from multiple locations. And you can see from this Venn diagram that the sweet spot for the always addressable customer is at the intersection of all of those behaviors. And just for a quick data point as you think about this concept, the always addressable customer will represent half of all global online consumers by the end of 2013. So here we are approaching the end of this year, and this is not a fringe population. This is actually half of all online customers around the world, including developing countries. So if we move on to the next slide then, you'll see that my notion here for marketers is that creating a good email program that accommodates the always addressable customer can actually be extremely valuable. These are not Forrester research findings, but they were so powerful I wanted to include them. Epsilon targeting finds that multi-channel households, so our always addressable customers, actually spend more than twice as much as an online-only or an offline-only household. And then Accenture finds that in the banking vertical, multi-channel customers who are banking through multiple channels tend to result in cross-sells that are 5 times greater than what you get for a customer that just has a single banking set of access points. So my point here is that email is certainly more competitive because of all of the utilization. Email attitudes prove that email is a great medium for marketers. But if email is not executed well, you actually are missing out on a significant lift over the kinds of products and the kinds of revenue that you're selling today. So why don't I have you go ahead and move on to the next slide as well. So I think what most marketers are after today, and if you're not thinking about this, you should be, is a notion of integrated messaging. So this is the idea of coordinating communications across channels and platforms and making those communications focus on driving desired behaviors that improve outcomes and maximize value for both customers and marketers. So what I'm saying here is that the past has been about email, buy now types of messages. The future is about creating cross-channel and cross-platform communications that balance business goals and user needs. And today, the challenge, if you go ahead and click onto the next slide, is that most vendors can't comprehensively meet all of marketers' needs. So when we study this notion of integrated messaging, there are a number of different functionalities that are required for a marketer to successfully be able to pull it off. And you can see on the left-hand side of your screen here the functionality that we think is critical to create this integrated messaging ideal. Things like data integration and profile management, things like content management, things like delivery of multi-channel messages across platforms, measurement, testing, contact optimization. And today there's a host of vendors that are all applying for space in creating solutions for marketers in this regard. But you can see from our Harvey balls here that not a single category of vendor can comprehensively support every one of the left-hand side needs. So probably it's your email service providers, your marketing automation providers, your marketing service providers, and your cross-channel campaign management tools that are the best, that are the closest to being able to provide a comprehensive set of capabilities. But what that means is that it's extremely competitive if you happen to be a vendor in one of those spaces to be able to win business from marketers. So I think that brings me to my set of recommendations, which are some thoughts then for you as marketers, how to work with an email service provider, and if you're an ESP joining us, how to think about creating differentiation within your own product set to be best appeal to end buyers. So what I think we're going to see in the future is a movement away from just a standalone set of marketing technologies to a much more comprehensive marketing platform. And Forrester calls this Customer Decision Management, or CDM for short. Now, CDM actually has a few different pieces. It has, first of all, the notion of continuous testing. So today, many marketing platforms have testing that's stapled on to an existing set of organic capabilities. This implies that testing would be done as a part of the entire platform, that there would be testing in an ongoing basis about every element of a campaign, not just about a scheduled test that's looking at a subject line or a scheduled test that's looking at one creative versus another creative. This would be testing every possible combination in every possible campaign along the way. The other thing you'll find that a CDM platform has is contextual arbitration. This means that the CDM platform is taking into account location, social context, you know, the who, the where, and the why a certain user behavior might be demonstrated. So again, today platforms can target based on location, but they may not be able to comprehensively adjust the types of messages that you're getting based on where you are. And many also don't have an awareness of things like, who are you with? The context of me on the subway might be very different when I'm on my way to work than when I'm on my way to a concert with my friends. And what types of content or what types of offers should be delivered to me in those different contexts. And a CDM platform is a tool that has that level of intelligence baked in. The other component of a CDM platform is that it provides longitudinal optimization. So this means that it is focused on optimizing communications and content delivered through it to a customer throughout an entire life cycle with that customer. So most platforms today focus on optimizing single instances, maybe for a single set of performance metrics. I want to get the best click-through I can out of this email newsletter. I want to get the best response out of the link that's going in underneath this picture. Longitudinal optimization is about how do I create a series of communications across multiple touch points to create the best customer relationship that I can over a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year horizon. And then the last piece of the CDM platform is this cross-functional routing piece. This is a dimension that actually says that it's not just marketing that has an interest in what data should go into the CDM platform and how to use the CDM platform. So this is a notion that the CDM platform would accomplish the needs of any customer-facing employee, sales, service, marketing, to coordinate all of the customer experiences that are being sent and delivered and deployed. So thanks, Nick. I think we're ready to move on to the next slide. Great. So my next point here is that I think that you can expect vendors in response to marketer demand to help marketers take a more adaptive approach to data. So this notion of adaptive approach to data also has several different dimensions that it encompasses. First of all, most companies today tend to store data in perpetuity, in part because they just don't know what they're going to need and when they might need it. So companies are sitting on volumes of data, most of which goes unused. So the first fundamental of an adaptive approach to data is to help marketers call out to data when it's needed, instead of storing these massive volumes of data in your own data center. So the idea is that this would limit risk. You'd have less data that you're having to protect. It would also allow for more current access to data. You're only calling for information when it's needed. And it would allow for a company to store only the pieces that are critical for them and then create partnerships with others who are storing other critical elements that they can then trade back and forth. The second big piece of an adaptive approach to data is that a company must steward and organize data that is created and stored within the enterprise. So most companies today don't do a rigorous job of even auditing what information they have. And so this also implies that a company would go through the exercise of figuring out what data do we have, setting some definitions around what counts as a particular data element, and then that informs some of the decisions about what data should be stored and what data could be accessed through partners. And all of this actually speaks to the third piece of a more adaptive approach to data, which is the idea of actually packaging up your data to trade with a partner network. We've seen this happening in bits and pieces in more commercial applications around things like online advertising. But this is an idea of any company, a merchant, not just a data provider, packaging up the data that they have available for sale or for exchange. For example, Walmart has lots and lots of product information available from its POS systems that it might create value out of by exchanging with merchant partners, retailers, and wholesalers. So my notion for you here is that this is the future of how a company can be more facile with its data, and I think it can turn to vendor partners to help with this. So go ahead, Nick, and click on to my next slide for me. Now, my last point for you here is that a marketer, in thinking about how to create relevant communications for the always addressable customer, has to think about creating unified, not uniform experiences. So there's a very important, even though subtle, difference here, where a unified experience is one that expresses the brand personality across a series of communications, but accounts for the difference in media that might change the way a user experiences that brand message. A uniform experience is just identical from one platform to the next. So you can, I think, illustrate this best with a comparison between mobile and your desktop experience, where obviously a mobile experience is smaller, it requires different kind of navigation, and you might even care about information differently through a mobile context than on a desktop. I'm more interested in location-specific content when I'm on my mobile. Likewise, when I'm engaged in social media, I might be much more interested in things like community-oriented content than when I'm on a website or when I'm on a mobile. So the notion of unified experiences is taking everything you know about your customers and everything we've talked about around technology and using the information to come up with the right experience for the right platform, and using the technology to help automate the deployment of those messages into the appropriate platform. So I think this is a good place to pivot into my last set of recommendations, which is about thinking about how, as a vendor, you might be able to stay on top of all of these developments in 2014 for your marketer clients. And if you are a marketer listening into this call, how to think about where to push your email service provider or your cross-channel campaign management tool to advance. So Nick, go ahead and click on to my last slide here. So my points for you to think about are that there's no doubt that accommodating all of these developments is expensive, but maybe more importantly, it's very difficult to do at the pace that the market is demanding. And so, one option to stay on top of that is to consider offshoring. And you're going to hear a lot more from Lister in just a moment about some of the ways that they are working with email vendors and cross-channel campaign management tools to provide a lot of these capabilities that we've just been talking about. But my recommendations for you, if you're considering offshoring, or even if you've not thought about it until this webinar, are to think about 3 dimensions when you're looking for an outsourced partner. First is around reliability. And I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen as I've studied email vendors is that when they move fast to try to accommodate growing market demand, they end up, unfortunately, with errors. And we've probably all seen some of the cases of where this has happened, because it tends to be a lot of ugly press. So one piece I would look for with a partner is around their reliability and how they can promote your reliability through things like error proofing and through resilience of their infrastructure that can back up, support your own. The other place I think an outsourced partner can help is just around speed of innovation. You know, we talked about a lot of things that are going to be very tricky to develop quickly. And so, you know, you can think about partners that can provide you more capabilities and just enable faster development, so helping you tick off more things to do quickly. And then my last point here is I think offshoring can help with scale. That's another place where, as you've seen through my comments, vendors are falling short today. We're talking about an environment where the always addressable customer could be interacting with communications through a refrigerator door or a tabletop, certainly wearable communications. And the idea of being able to support the technology required to automate that is a tricky one for most companies, most technology companies today. So offshoring can help there. And I also think another point to probe as you're considering offshored support is how efficient can they be at their own performance level. So can they help improve scale for you, but in a way that is efficient, so cost-effective, not just as expensive as hiring your own set of developers. So I think that brings me to my conclusion here. Just to summarize the points that I hope you've taken away from me, I certainly find that email continues to be the most cost-effective way to engage customers. And I'll tell you, I've been studying this medium since 1997, and I'm still not tired of it because it continues to be so tried and true. But marketers can improve their email programs beyond where they are today. And they need to start thinking about it aggressively for 2014 because user expectations are on the rise. And I think for many marketers, there's not a good vendor option today that will comprehensively support everything they need to do to improve their programs to address all of the needs that their end customers have. So consider, if you're a vendor offshoring, that it may actually be just what you need to improve your innovation pace and scale. And I think you can be successful with offshoring, but I'm going to give you a critical piece to push on, is that you only want to offshore if you find a partner that specializes in creating efficiency and helping you innovate, discovering new opportunities. Otherwise, you're going to end up with just more resources, but not necessarily the benefit that you had in mind. So I think at this point, I'm going to conclude my remarks. I'm certainly happy to take questions at the end of our conversation here, and I'm going to pass the conversation over to Kumar from Lister Technologies, who's going to share some thoughts and some of the work that they've been doing to date. Kumar, over to you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Shar. Yeah, Nick, go ahead.
Yes, no, I was just going to certainly say thank you to Shar. Also just mention that we do have a handful of questions for after the session already in the queue, and we would, of course, love to take any more if anybody wants to submit them through the chat. And then, Kumar, if you'd like, I'd be happy to sort of manage a transition and a bit of an introduction over to your side as well. Forrester is, of course, working with Lister for this webinar that you're sitting in on. Lister Technologies specializes in offering technology and professional services to ESPs by leveraging specifically an offshore delivery model that Shar was mentioning and discussing at the end of her presentation. Up next, you're going to be hearing from Kumar Sivaraman. He has more than 20 years of experience working with Fortune 500 and mid-market enterprises in building broad-based offshore programs to enable innovation, time to market, and cost efficiency imperatives. And we have a bit of content from Kumar if you would like to discuss how offshoring can help support ESPs as they look to help marketers capture the e-messaging opportunity. So Kumar, I will go ahead and advance the slide for you, and take it away, please.
Thank you so much, Nick. Shar, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. What I want to continue is to learn from the things which you have said, that of the addressable customer and the kind of things which are going on to balance the business goals and the user needs. It's actually exciting for us because that would result in a lot of new technologies and new solutions that would be built by marketers to go forward and target the addressable customer with the CDM framework that we just mentioned. Some of the good news from our end is that we have been really seeing some high impact programs, some of which is in the direction of what you mentioned. And I just wanted to share some high impact programs that we have done. For example, the Golden Window campaign, which we had done for one of the ESPs, where the program was such that it was targeting a customer who was in the Golden Window, as in he did not buy a particular airline ticket and he quit that, and yet he was being targeted, and therefore a series of campaigns to see how we can bring him back. So that was an innovative program that we had worked on. Following which, another one which is in terms of a global lifecycle management, where one of the marketers decided to really segment the entire lifecycle of a consumer and target certain specific programs addressed to each of those segments he is in. For example, whether the customer is a first-time buyer, then what else does he move on after that, and until the sunset, the entire life cycle was mapped and how the program was targeted against that consumer. Of late, we have also been seeing a lot of activity in the remarketing initiatives, where specifically on the commerce side of the business, where customers drop out of carts, where there is shopping cart abandonment, as they call it, they are being targeted to see how you can bring back them. So that's a lot of innovation in terms of identifying such customers, even if they are one time and even if they are seeing coming again as a loyal customer pack, both of which are addressed through remarketing techniques which we have seen. And we've also seen some interesting sweepstakes programs where customers the marketers are running some very specific sweepstake programs where there's a lot of technology usage in terms of ensuring the success of the program, so that the same person doesn't really get to the benefit of having logging in multiple times, and then it is really result oriented to see how the success of this program is achieved. Moving on to the multivariate testing, there is A, B, C, and D, and E kinds of testing which we have seen, where one was really looking at the different kinds of segments, market segments, and therefore the addressable customer is really one in each of these types of testing. So I won't go through the entire list. I think this is just to give a flavor of the different types of programs that we have seen in the past, where it's already in the direction of what Shar just mentioned in terms of addressing the customer, or the always addressable customer, as what she called it. So if we click to the next slide, if one were to really look at this entire set of programs or the kind of things which a marketer would do, broadly we feel that there are three factors that we are seeing. One is innovation, scale, and reliability, which the three factors which are mentioned, and we can see that reflected in terms of how an organization grows in terms of maturity to really address this. And while there are a set of things which are done on innovation, which I just mentioned over for the past programs that we did, of equal importance are the other two, where, for example, if there are different services that which an ESP has to offer, then how do you really go through each one of them or all of them together at a mature state? So that's the packaging of the entire services which you would like to do as a complete program. So that's one which lends itself a certain scale, which gives us the benefit of economies of scale when it really matures. The second one is that of a process maturity. Whenever we attempt to really get on to this kind of a program, what are the different kinds of processes that need to really be addressed? How mature can you get, and what is the level of maturity that is needed when you hand it over to a different team, and that can come live when the whole program is being executed. And the third, of course, is the most important, which any marketer would look at, which is the velocity of the throughput, which you'd like it to be. Specifically in this context, where some of the programs have a very short window, which could be hours, or which could lend itself to being even days. So the agility of the organization offshore comes into play in executing some of this is through a very well-defined, customized, I would say, delivery model, which can address all these variants at one go. And importantly, when you achieve the scale and execute the innovation part, what is assumed normally is the reliability, and Shah talked about the parameters inside that, which is error-free and infrastructure resilience. Now, first is to lay a platform for reliability using to give the infrastructure resilience. That's typically the security, the tools that you're going to use, the solidity in which you can handle data, because what's very important here is most of the times we are dealing with the production environments, and therefore when you do a certain activity like segmentation and personalization, it's important to get the error-free data out, as well as very important when you churn out millions of mails through the platform, you are not shortchanged on the performance aspect. And therefore, the reliability with which the process really works is of the great importance to do that. And when you structure all these three with these three critical factors, that would be a mature kind of an engagement as what we have seen in the past. And if you click to the next slide, you would really get to the engagement, some kind of a dashboard that you would see is to help understand if there are different kinds of services. We called it service variants in the previous slide. There are about 6 types of services that we have seen which are typically provided by the ESPs, which is what is listed in the left. And if one were to decide across these 3 dimensions of innovation, scale, and reliability, the key question that people would ask is, where do I start? And obviously, the easy points would be the ones which are in green, and those are the places where I would say the risk of offshoring, which is basically measured as impact and ease of offshoring, is probably less. It's not to say that the other ones are risky, but it is just going to take a little bit of time. For example, the reason why the replatforming activity, the services, is going to take a little longer is it involves an understanding of the platform before you really get to replatforming. And similarly, when you do mission critical activity like onboarding, for example, you really have to take into consideration the end customer of ESP service provider, which means that you are directly online in terms of their revenue, and therefore the process maturity really comes into play, and therefore that needs to be addressed. So overall, that's the kind of program, and if you straddle across the 6 services over a period of time, the maturity of the whole engagement keeps growing, and the business understanding of operating in an environment which is on the production, which has a very tight control. Sometimes the best way to telescope 48 hours and 24 hours using the time difference really comes into play. Giving time to market advantage to the marketers is of critical importance. And if you click the last stage, what I spoke of till now is essentially out of our experience, which comes from 8 years of managing offshore programs for the ESPs, a wide variety of technologies that are useful for the things which Shar spoke of to get to market, right from social media to mobile to internet-based technologies to build those solutions. And importantly, understanding the business of ESPs, specifically in the mid-market enterprises. We follow a service delivery model which is based on the distributed agile, and follow the Sun approach, which enables global rollouts. We relate to this particular business, which is not the traditional type to be offshore, but something which has very specific requirements and is evolving all the time. With this, I would like to hand it back to Nick to coordinate the next activity of question and answer. Thank you.
Wonderful, Kumar. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to everyone who have submitted questions into our chat box here. So I will go ahead and serve up a few that we've collected. And Shar, the first question I'm going to ask is for you. So the panelist, or the participant asks, what are the most important steps for ESPs to tackle in 2014 in order to help their marketer clients meet their customers' shifting needs?
Oh, so a great question, and I guess my first thought is that it probably depends a little bit on what your capabilities are today. So as an email service provider, I would tend to look at what you needed to do in a matrix that has two parts. One, I would look at the overall capability that you need to reach an ideal state. So that would mean lots of the things that we've been talking about here: data integration, ability to message across multiple platforms, managing a single view of the customer, helping with data hygiene, all of those pieces. So I'd look at the comprehensive state of those capabilities. But then I'd look at another index, which is urgency. And the urgency scale would be something that's based on how good you are at it already. So if you're already pretty good, then it doesn't need to be a priority. And if you have a competitor who's really, really good at it, then maybe it does need to be a priority. So that's the way that I would grade myself if I were an email service provider. To summarize, so if we sort of said, okay, everybody's going to have a little bit different way of looking at the things that should be their priorities for the year based on what they're good at and what they need to be good at, what I would say the pieces are that I would prioritize are all around the data. I actually think that, I'm saying, I'm going to put easy in quotation marks, but I actually think it's easier to create execution capabilities than I think it is to actually create the ability to manage and mine data in an intelligent way. And so that's what I would focus on, and I think there's a few parts of that. I think one is about data access, so creating partnerships with many different types of data providers that provide data in many different formats. I think it's about data hygiene, so being able to bring in data that's in different formats and create it and format it in a way that's all uniform and can be easily used. And then I think there's a way, the other piece is just making sure that all of that data can be easily organized around your customers or around groups of customers so that you don't have multiple sets of data that all represent the same user. And that would be the thing that I would prioritize going into 2014. And then I'd keep that matrix in mind so that you yourself can look at your strengths and capabilities and the things that might be unique priorities for you.
Thanks, Char. It's a well thought out response. I really appreciate that. And we have probably time for one, maybe two additional questions. The next one, I believe, is for the Lister team. So Kumar, somebody asks, if I was thinking about leveraging a firm like Lister, what do you think are the key things that I should ask up front to make sure that the project and the program is going to be a good fit for me?
Sure, Nick. I would really answer that question from 2-3 perspectives, and from the experience that we have had. Different organizations are in different stages of maturity with respect to number one, the processes that they operate. Number two, the kind of business benefits and the business case that they would really adopt to go after a particular program like offshoring. And number three, the kind of innovation or the kind of initiatives that they have on their table. Now, based on these three, typically one would then try and understand where they have to start. But some of the things which clearly come to my mind are, one is we have to start with a clear roadmap in terms of saying, if, for example, you start off with a particular service, what are the kinds of things which you're going to do as a sequel of to that operation? Because what we have seen is most of these items are all linked very closely to each other. So what happens is that the benefits of the whole program starts really turning in once you start, expanding from one piece to another. And the critical aspect here is the order in which you arrange, which is based on each of the priorities of the three segments that I mentioned. And whichever way you look at it, what's really important is the kind of understanding, and what we have seen is each customer is very different, and each customer has a platform that is very different, the capabilities are different, and therefore that is the focus of seeing what amount of activity is going to happen there, and what's the kind of understanding of that would an offshore provider really bring to the table. That's what I would say I would go by.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Kumar. So that brings us to the end of our presentation session. Certainly, we all wish to thank everyone that was here participating with us today. As a reminder, there is a webinar survey that you can fill out to let us know how we did here today. We will be following up with a link to the webinar, which will have a copy of the presentation in PowerPoint for you. And also, please keep an eye out for a future session that Lister will be holding with analyst Peter Sheldon. More on that to come in the future. So once again, thank you everyone for your time today, and please have a happy holiday season.